used to think that getting old would feel like crossing a finish line. That one day, I'd wake up and know, this is it, the summit, the grand old age they write poems and speeches about. But the truth is, it doesn't happen like that. You don't cross into 80 with a fanfare. You drift there, quietly, like leaves falling in autumn. One moment you're raking the yard, and the next you're sitting by the window watching the trees do it themselves. And it's funny, I didn't mind turning 80. What got to me was what came after, the silence that grew a little louder each day. Not the silence of peace. No, the kind that makes you question if you've started disappearing. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way that happens when fewer people say your name out loud. There was a time I walked down to Joe's bakery every morning. Not because I needed bread, but because I needed the nod from Clara behind the counter. The old man on the corner who always asked how the Yankees were doing. The little boy who waved at me from his porch like I was someone important. Those moments, they stitched the days together. But then winter came harder that year. My knees didn't like the cold. I skipped the bakery one morning, then two. I told myself I'd go when it was warmer. But by the time spring came, the routine had broken. And with it, something else cracked inside me. A sense of presence. You know, I never thought much of those tiny greetings before. A nod here, a smile there. But now I see they were anchors. Tiny confirmations that I was still part of the world. That I hadn't vanished in slow motion. People think loneliness is loud. It's not. It's quiet. It's the absence of voices. The absence of being needed for anything other than staying out of the way. And it creeps in when you stop showing up for the small things, the newspaper run, the chat at the post office, even that pointless walk around the block where you always see the same dog. I didn't quit life. Life got quieter. And I didn't push back. Now, I don't tell you this to sound sad. I've made peace with many things. But if there's one thing I'd whisper to anyone still heading toward their 80s, it's this: don't let the little connections fade. Because when they go, it's not just the world that grows dimmer. You do too. I remember one morning I did try to go back. Put on my shoes, bundled up. Got to the corner and Joe's was still there. Clara wasn't. Retired, they said. The boy on the porch? Gone, moved away last summer. I stood there and felt like a ghost in a place that used to remember me. That was the first time I realized. It's not just that people vanish from your life. Sometimes you vanish from theirs. And when that happens, you have to make a choice. You either rebuild new bridges, or sit in the ruin of the old ones. Me? I tried again. I started saying good morning to strangers at the park. Asked the young man in the convenience store how his day was. Gave my old watch to a boy who said he liked the ticking sound. Tiny things. Insignificant, maybe, but they made the silence retreat even just a little. There's something else I've noticed, too. Something about how we move or stop moving. My neighbor, Tom, he used to walk every evening. Rain or shine, I'd see him pass my window right around 6. He'd wave even if I didn't. Then one day he slipped. Not badly, just a scare. After that, he stayed in. I didn't see him again for weeks. When I finally did, he was hunched more than I remembered. His voice softer, like something in him had shrunk while sitting too long. I get it. The ground doesn't feel steady like it used to. I've had days where I looked at the stairs and thought, maybe not today. But here's the thing. The less you do, the less you can do. That's the trap. No one tells you that playing it safe can be the riskiest thing. It's not just your muscles that weaken. Your confidence does. Your identity does. One less step becomes 2. Then 10. Then you wake up and realize you haven't been outside in a week. And your shoes still sit by the door, waiting for a version of you that isn't coming back. But I've learned something simple: motion is memory. When I move, even just a little, my body remembers that I'm here. That I'm still here. I stretch now every morning. Nothing fancy, just a few twists, a few leg lifts. And I walk to the mailbox myself. Slow, sure, but I walk. And on days I don't feel like it, those are the days I know I must. Not because it'll change the world, but because it keeps me in it. I used to love the mornings. Not because I was a morning person, no, that was always my wife, Mary. She'd rise with the sun, humming to the birds like she was one of them. Me, I was slower. I like to ease into the day, coffee in hand, slippers on, watching the light change through the kitchen window. But now mornings feel different. They come earlier, not because I wake rested, but because I wake too soon. 3, maybe 4 in the morning. Sometimes with dreams I can't quite remember, only the ache they leave behind. I sit in the dark, not frightened, just unsettled. There's a stillness at that hour that isn't peaceful. It's hollow, like the world forgot to start itself. Took me a long time to understand what was happening. I thought it was just old age, that maybe the body just doesn't need as much sleep when it's closer to the end. But that's not it. What no one tells you is that your internal clock, the one that used to hum along with the sun and moon, starts getting confused. And not because of anything dramatic. It's the quiet habits that do it. Closing the blinds too early in the evening, keeping the lights on too late, watching television right before bed, letting that blue glow flood your eyes, and worst of all, staying indoors day after day without ever really seeing the sky. Your body doesn't know what time it is anymore, and when the body loses track of time, the mind follows. I noticed it first in how foggy I felt. Not forgetful, just muffled. Like my thoughts were a few seconds behind my words. Like I was walking through water and trying to act like it was air. Then came the naps, long ones in the middle of the day. I'd sit down after lunch just to rest my eyes. And next thing I knew, it was 4 p.m. The whole day, gone in a blink. And then the night would stretch long and restless, leaving me staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd forgotten to live. It wasn't depression. It wasn't even grief. It was disorientation, a slow slipping of rhythm, a house with its lights turned on at all the wrong times. I started changing things, gently, quietly, opened the blinds as soon as I woke up, even when the sky was gray. Sat on the porch for 20 minutes, no matter the weather. Some days I just sat with a blanket and breathed the air, watched the clouds, let my skin remember what morning felt like. And at night I made a rule. No screens after 8. Just soft lamps and maybe a book. I found myself reaching for poetry again. Not because I understood every line, but because poetry doesn't rush you. It meets you in stillness. Within weeks, something shifted. My sleep got deeper, my thoughts clearer. I still woke early, sure, but not with that hollow ache. More with a kind of calm, like I was finally tuned back to the earth again. Light, it's a quiet medicine. We underestimate it because it's always been there. But after 80, you need it more than ever. Not just on your skin, but in your eyes, in your brain, in your soul. You need the day to feel like day, and the night to feel like night. Otherwise, everything starts blending together. And eventually, so do you. That blending, that's the real danger, I think. Days without shape, nights without rest. Time turning into a fog you can't walk through. It's a quiet killer. And like most of them, it doesn't arrive with sirens. It comes in slippers with a cup of lukewarm tea and the thought, maybe I'll go outside tomorrow instead. But tomorrow becomes next week, and next week becomes never. That's how it starts. So if you're still here, still listening to this old man talk about curtains and clocks and morning light, leave me a comment. Tell me how your mornings feel these days. Tell me what helps you feel awake. Because maybe what saves us isn't some grand fix. Maybe it's just remembering together. Naming these small things out loud so they don't stay hidden. Maybe that's how we help each other keep going, not with answers but with echoes. There's a chair in my living room I don't sit in anymore. It's Mary's chair. Was, I suppose. But I still say is when I talk about it. It faces the window, the one that catches the evening sun just right. She liked to sit there with a book in her lap, glasses slipping down her nose, even if she was barely reading. Sometimes she'd just hold the pages open and watch the birds. She's been gone 5 years now. And grief is strange after 80. It doesn't break you like it does when you're young. No, it seeps. It moves in quiet. It settles into your bones like the cold. You stop crying not because you've healed, but because the tears have grown tired of showing up to a party with no one left. People ask me if I miss her. I don't know how to answer that. It's not just that I miss her. It's that she's still everywhere. In the way I butter toast. In the way I fold the towels wrong. She used to laugh at that. In the Sunday afternoons that feel too long now. There's no way to miss someone who never really left the room. You just ache differently. And here's what no one tells you. After a certain age, grief isn't an event. It's a background noise, a low hum, sometimes soft enough that you forget it's there, other times loud enough that you can't hear anything else. People think you get better at loss as you get older. You don't. You just become more practiced at carrying it. Like walking with a stone in your pocket. You learn how to move so it doesn't always scrape. The hardest part? You stop talking about it. Not because you're over it, but because the world expects you to be. They think 5 years is long enough. Or 10. Or 20. As if love has an expiration date. As if memories don't keep showing up with your morning coffee, asking for just a little bit of space at the table. I remember my friend Harold. Lost his wife the same year I lost Mary. We'd sit together in silence more than we'd talk. Just two old men breathing. But one afternoon he said something I won't forget. He said, "You know what I miss most? Not her laugh, not her cooking, but the sound of someone walking through the house who wasn't me." That hit me hard, because that's what grief really is, sometimes. The silence of footsteps that no longer come. And it's not just spouses. It's friends. It's siblings. It's the people you called for no reason. The ones who remembered your stories before you had to retell them. The ones who laughed at your jokes even when they weren't funny. Loss piles up in quiet ways. And if you're not careful, it'll start folding you in. Not all at once, but in little ways. You stop telling your stories because the people who knew the beginning aren't around to hear the end. You stop singing because no one joins in. You stop reaching out because you don't want to be the one who always calls first. And so you start packing your feelings away, like winter clothes you think you'll never need again. You smile politely, say, "I'm fine," even when you're not, and the world believes you, but your body knows. It always does. It knows when you're holding things in. Your chest gets tighter. Your stomach turns sour. Your sleep becomes shallow. You lose your appetite not just for food, but for living. And no one connects it to grief, because you never said it out loud. That's the danger. Not the grief itself, but the silence around it. I've learned you have to speak it, even if it's just to yourself. I talk to Mary sometimes, not in some ghostly way, just soft words. In the kitchen while making tea. At night when I hear the wind. I tell her when something made me laugh. I tell her when I feel broken. I tell her that I still can't fold the towels the way she liked. And sometimes I write, not for anyone to read, just to put it somewhere, because pain when kept too long hardens. It turns to bitterness or illness or a kind of numbness that no amount of sunshine can undo. But when you let it out even just a little, it softens again. It breathes. It makes room for other feelings to come through. I've seen it happen. A woman at our senior center, Ruth, lost her son in his 40s. Never spoke of it for years. Then one day she read a poem out loud during group, and halfway through, she broke. Her hands shook, her voice cracked, and we all just sat there with her. She apologized, of course, said she didn't mean to make a scene, but none of us wanted her to say sorry. That was the most alive I'd seen her in a long time, because when the heart finally breathes, the body remembers what life feels like. There was a time not long ago, really, when every day had a shape. Monday was laundry. Tuesday, groceries. Wednesdays, I used to visit the library even if I didn't need a book. Just like the smell of the place. Thursdays, I'd call my grandson and ask him how school was, even though he always answered in 3 words or less. The days had corners, you know? Edges. Meaning. They started and ended with a kind of rhythm that held me together. But at some point, I couldn't even tell you exactly when, that rhythm began to unravel. One of the clubs I used to go to closed down. My friend Ed, the one I'd meet for lunch once a week, moved to a care facility out of town. My back started acting up, so I stopped going to the community garden. And just like that, the days blurred. I'd wake up and stare out the window, trying to remember what day it was. Not because of memory loss, but because there wasn't anything anchoring it. Nothing to make Tuesday feel any different from Sunday. A strange kind of freedom, some might say, but it didn't feel free. Felt Adrift. That's the thing about purpose. People always talk about it like it's supposed to be some grand vision, a legacy, a life's work, some profound mission. But after 80, purpose doesn't wear a cape. It's humble, unassuming. Sometimes it looks like feeding the cat who always shows up at 7 a.m. Sometimes it's fixing that squeaky cabinet door, not because anyone cares, but because you do. I didn't realize how much those small tasks kept me rooted until they weren't there anymore. And when they faded, so did something in me. I'd find myself staying in pajamas past noon. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't see the point. Meals became whatever. A piece of toast, maybe. Cup of tea. I used to light a candle when I ate dinner. Mary loved that, said it made even soup feel like a special occasion. But the matches stayed in the drawer now. Why bother? That question, why bother? That's a dangerous one, because once it shows up, it keeps coming back. Why bother shaving today? Why bother walking to the mailbox? Why bother calling anyone if they're probably busy? And slowly, without anyone noticing, not even you at first, your life begins to shrink. The room gets smaller even if the walls haven't moved. You stop making plans, stop starting conversations, and eventually you start waiting. Not for anything in particular, just waiting. As if time itself will give you permission to matter again. But time doesn't hand out invitations. It waits for you to show up. It was my neighbor's little girl who pulled me out of it. Oddly enough. She's maybe 8 or 9, always on her bike. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, pretending to read, and she stopped at the edge of the driveway. "You don't smile anymore," she said, just like that.
No hesitaste.
I was stunned. I didn't even know she'd noticed me before. She pedaled off before I could respond. But those words, they stayed. The next morning I baked cookies. Not because I wanted sweets, but because it gave the day something to do. I left a few in a small tin on their porch. No note, just a small act of return. And it worked. Not in some magical, everything is fixed way, but in the quiet way that putting your feet on the ground in the morning works. It reminded me that I could still contribute something, even if it was just sugar and flour and a warm smell in the kitchen again. From then on, I started bringing the shape back. I picked one thing a day, just one, that made the day feel different. A letter to my niece, cleaning out a drawer, sitting outside at sunset and naming 5 things I saw. Some days I still felt tired, but tired with reason feels different than tired from emptiness. Purpose doesn't ask for applause. It just asks for presence. Even a small one. I think of Ruth again, the woman I mentioned earlier. She once told me that every Monday, she writes postcards to people she barely knows. A neighbor's aunt in assisted living, a friend's cousin recovering from surgery, even a young man she met once on the bus. Just a few kind lines. That's her rhythm. She said it helps her remember that she still has something worth giving: words, time, attention. And I believe her, because when we stop believing we matter, the body listens. It slows down. Appetite drops. Muscles forget why they need to stay strong. Sleep becomes less restful, not because the bed is uncomfortable, but because the mind no longer dreams toward anything. I don't need a bucket list anymore. I just need Tuesday to feel different than Monday. And for that, one small purpose is enough. Sometimes, late at night, I'll sit in the kitchen with a warm mug in my hands and ask myself a simple question. What is keeping me here? Not in a morbid way, not in fear or regret, just gently curious, like asking a tree why it's still standing after so many winters. And often the answer is quiet. It isn't something grand or loud or obvious. Sometimes it's the note my grandson sent last week. 5 crooked words and a heart drawn in red crayon. Sometimes it's the sound of rain tapping on the window, reminding me that even the sky still moves. Sometimes it's the rhythm of my own breath. But other times, I realize something harder, something I've had to face over and over since turning 80. I need to choose to stay alive, not just breathing, not just avoiding illness, but alive, engaged, aware, rooted. And the hardest part about that choice? No one claps when you make it. No one sees you get out of bed on a cold morning and stretch even though your bones ache. No one witnesses you cook a proper meal for yourself after 3 days of toast and tea. No one celebrates you for opening the window, taking a shower, or brushing your thinning hair. But I do. I celebrate it. Every single time. Because I know what it costs. There's a kind of exhaustion that settles in around this age. Not just in the body, but in the soul. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too many yesterdays. You reach a point where your memories outnumber your plans. And if you're not careful, that imbalance becomes a weight you stop fighting. I remember talking to a man at church, Bernard. He was 87. He told me he hadn't laughed in months. Not because nothing was funny, but because he'd forgotten how. Said the world just felt too heavy to lift that kind of sound anymore. So I asked him to tell me about his wife. He blinked, surprised, then smiled, the kind of smile that comes slowly, from somewhere deep. And for 20 minutes, he spoke like someone who hadn't been spoken to in years. At the end of it, he chuckled. Just once. But it cracked through the silence like sunlight through blinds. That was the sound of him choosing life again. And that's all any of us can do. Choose again and again to stay connected, to stay curious, to stay soft, even when the world feels like it's shrinking, because it does shrink if we let it. Not all at once, but in corners. You stop writing, you stop walking, you stop reaching out. And the danger isn't death, it's fading. But you can push back, with light, with motion, with feeling, with tiny connections, with one small act of purpose each day. That's how we live past 80, not just in years, but in fullness. Not with perfect health or youthful energy, but with presence. Some days, all I manage is to sit on the porch and wave at the neighbor's dog. Some days I write a letter I might never send. Some days I weep, quietly, while folding laundry, because the smell of the fabric softener reminds me of someone I miss. But each of those days, I choose to be here, and maybe that's enough. So if you're listening to this, maybe sitting quietly with your own cup of something warm, or lying in bed with thoughts that won't settle, I just want to say you're not alone in this. The stillness isn't empty. It's waiting for you. If you'd like to return, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere. Take care of your light. Let it flicker if it needs to, but don't let it go out.